what do you think are the broad categories of Western Hermetic tradition? Besides, did that encompass the Kabbalah and alchemy and the Rosicrucians and Masons and Ordo Templi Orientis? That, or how
and Gnosticism. And there has been communication from other cultures too. There seems to be an influence of Sufism and other Arabic mystics on a lot of the Western occult tradition. And there's even some evidence of a Buddhist influence too. So the Western tradition is not that much different from the Eastern. No, I mean, it's very different, but it's not totally different.
How does Gnosticism, traditional Christianity, and Christian mysticism differ from one another? And do they interact or overlap in any way, do you think? I guess you could probably subtract traditional Christianity from that whole mix.
Well, Gnosticism was condemned when the Roman Church got power over all the other Christian churches and managed to suppress them all, or thought it did, for 1,000 years or so, up until the first successful Protestant Revolution with Martin Luther. But actually, these suppressed strains of Christianity never did die out. You can find evidence of them sometimes 2 centuries apart, but it's easier for me to believe they existed underground for 2 centuries than to believe they spontaneously got reborn after being wiped out. You can find the Knights Templar. There's a lot of evidence about the Knights Templar that seem to indicate a Gnostic origin for that. And a lot of what's called witchcraft seems to go back to the Gnostics. Rosicrucianism has a Gnostic flavor. Kabbalah was originally a Jewish mysticism, but it got mixed up with the Western Hermetic tradition, and they each influenced one another. And so there has always been, within organized Christianity, there has always been a subterranean strain of Gnosticism, never quite completely suppressed. You see this especially in Ireland, where the evidence indicates there was much more Gnostic influence than Roman Catholic influence up until about the 12th century. That's why the Pope sent the English in to conquer Ireland, is to get them into the Roman faith and wipe out the Gnostic, which they did not succeed in doing. There's still a lot of Gnosticism in Ireland.
Do the Gnostics in Ireland tie in with the Celts at all?
Well, there are so-called Druid movements which claim to be survivals of traditional Druidism, and they show a heavy similarity to Gnosticism. Whether that's because the Druids and the Gnostics had a lot in common, or because they at one point thought it was more fashionable to call themselves Druids, I don't know.
I had an instructor in college once who said that, it was a while ago, but the implication was that the Gnostics and the Christians during Roman times were 2 rival groups, and that the Christians overshadowed or won, at least on the surface, and it was just a matter of one of the groups would have won out and the other was destined not to, or that it could have gone either way.
Well, yeah, but that's statistically true, but not absolutely true. The Gnostics were not totally destroyed. Some of them fled north to Ireland. Some of them fled eastward and became part of Islam. There's a heavy Gnostic influence on Sufism, for instance. And some of them fled south, and we find a lot of Gnostic influence on southern Egyptian Christianity.
Did I guess what people consider the traditional Christianity that later formed Catholicism and then Protestantism, was that Christianity an outgrowth of Gnosticism? In other words, does like the Gnostic tradition include any of the same, like the Trinity or the Immaculate Conception or the whole life of Christ and crucifixion and all that? Do they include that in Gnostic tradition, or is that totally a separate philosophy that Christianity sprung out of?
Well, Gnosticism existed before Christianity. There were pagan Gnostics and Christian Gnostics. And the Christian Gnostics were quite capable of using the same symbols as the Orthodox Christians, but they would use them in a special way, knowing they were symbols, rather than degrading them to the level of mere history, as Alan Watts said. The Romish heresy developed by degrading great mythic symbols into mere history.
How did the Gnostic Gospels and the Apocrypha tie into this? Or is there such a thing as the Gnostic Gospels?
Yeah, there are quite a few of them, and they're very interesting reading indeed. The Gospel of Thomas, I think it's one of the great mystical books, right up there with the Tao Te Ching and I can't remember its name anymore. The Gateless Gate, the great book of Zen stories, and the Book of Lies by Crowley.
Does the Gnostic Gospels, are they separate from the Apocrypha? The Apocrypha, excuse me.
It depends on whose definition you're following.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And is it the Gospel of Thomas where the story of Lilith and...
No, Lilith does not appear in there. The Gospel of Thomas has some of the most interesting quotes of any of the Gnostic Gospels. For instance, not until the male becomes female and the female becomes male shall you enter into the kingdom of heaven. Or even more Gnostic than that, two shall lie down in the same bed, one shall die and the other shall rise. You find a great deal of alchemical meaning in that, I think. Oh yeah, my favorite quote from the Gospel of Thomas, if you say the kingdom of heaven is above, the birds will get there before you. If you say it is below, the worms will get there before you. I say the kingdom of heaven is within you. That has a kind of Lincoln-esque humor to it that is missing in the Synoptic Gospels.
The Gospel of Thomas, too, as you've indicated, has certain feminist elements, which is probably lacking in most of the biblical, I guess, books. Would you agree with
Well,
that?
I think that was part of the reason the Roman Church tried to wipe out Gnosticism is the Roman Church somehow or other became an all-male conspiracy. I guess that's the only word for it. They wanted to seize complete power over this new religion, which had tremendous spiritual power behind it, had tremendous appeal, charisma, salesmanship. It attracted the masses, and they wanted to get control over it. And Gnosticism was really, to a great extent, based on the combination of male and female energies. And the Roman thing was a totally male trip, and still is. Since just the other day, the Church of England decided to ordain women priests, and all the commentators were saying this will make it harder for the Anglican and Roman churches to be reconciled. One thing the Pope is absolutely adamant, so is the Council of Cardinals in Victoria, and that is no women priests. You got to have a willing to be a priest. The whole thing is based, it's on the priest represents Christ, and the most important thing about Christ was that he had a willing. The Gnostics thought the most important thing was that he developed a state of enlightenment which would be transmitted. Protestants think he represented compassion and love to an unparalleled extent. But to the Pope and the Catholic Church, the most important thing about Jesus was that he had a willing. So nobody can be a priest of Christ unless he also has a willing. And that's why women can't. This willy worship goes back to Paleolithic times. There are several good books on the worship of the phallus. One is by Thomas Wright, History of the Worship of the Generative Organs, and also The Golden Vow by Fraser. The Catholic Church picked up a lot of the phallic worship that was around the Mediterranean at that time. They think the willy is so important that I have often wondered if this has something to do with the secrecy that goes on when they choose a new pope. They seem to believe that the phallus is so sacred that maybe they select the candidate with the biggest willy, and that's how they pick the pope. So they're casting a porno movie. I don't know. It's just a wild guess, but they certainly do think that the willy is the most important religious emblem in the world.